Achilles, the great hero of the Trojan War, came into the world with a destiny as grand as it was tragic, marked by eternal glory and a premature death. He was born from the union of the famous hero Peleus and Nereid, but a prophecy said that his destiny was to be short-lived. The Divine Mother tried everything to prevent this outcome. In a magical ritual, Thetis immersed the baby in the sacred waters of the river Styx, making the hero virtually invulnerable. His only weak point was his ankle, which had not come into contact with the waters. Raised on the green plains of Phthia, little Achilles grew up under Chiron's tutelage, learning the crafts of war and wisdom, becoming the greatest of Greek warriors. Achilles had as training companions the strong warrior Ajax of Salamis and the noble Patroclus, the latter of whom became the brother-in-arms of Peleus' son. Achilles and Patroclus had a strong bond of brotherly love, which would change the fate of the coming war. When he was summoned to the Trojan War by Agamemnon, Achilles was forced by his mother to hide as a woman in King Lycomedes' court. This was his mother's last desperate measure to prevent her son from going to war and meeting his tragic fate. But the cunning hero Odysseus, after investigating the warrior's disappearance, found Achilles' hiding place. The hero did not want to escape his duty to his homeland, and went into hiding only to comply with his mother's divine order. As the heroes gathered to leave for Troy, the first major disagreement between Achilles and Agamemnon took place. The great Basileus used Achilles' name to lure Queen Clytemnestra and Princess Iphigenia to the shores of Aulis. By letter, Agamemnon ordered the queen to take her daughter to the camp so that she could marry Achilles. But it was all just a lie to lure Iphigenia to be sacrificed to appease the god's wrath. Achilles was furious to hear this, claiming that no one would touch Iphigenia without first having to face him. But, to Achilles' surprise, Iphigenia decided to accept the will of the gods and sacrificed herself for the good of all Greece. Achilles set sail for Troy in command of 50 ships, taking with him the Myrmidons, the brave warriors of Phthia. On the Trojan battlefield, his unparalleled rage and skills were evident, slaughtering countless opponents. Cycnus, the mighty warrior son of Poseidon, was one of the first honorable heroes to succumb to Achilles. During the years of the Greek siege of Troy, Achilles attacked and plundered cities allied to the enemy. He captured countless treasures, but all the riches stolen were no match for the beautiful Briseis, who became his prey of war. But Achilles' affection for this beautiful slave had a huge impact on the war. When the great Agamemnon gave up his slave Chryseis to appease Apollo's fury, he demanded as compensation that Briseis be handed over to him. Achilles was outraged by Agamemnon's demand. His anger almost made him murder Agamemnon in front of everyone, but Athena restrained the hero by pulling him by the hair. Consumed by resentment, Achilles said that he and his formidable Myrmidons would not fight alongside the Greeks again. The absence of Achilles and the Myrmidons made the Greeks pay with blood on the battlefield. The Trojans pushed the Greeks into their camp, even burning some of the Achaean ships. Realizing that the situation was hopeless, Patroclus, Achilles' faithful companion, begged him to return to the battlefield to help the Achaeans. But Achilles was undeterred, claiming he would never fight alongside Agamemnon again. But he allowed Patroclus to wear his armor and lead the Myrmidons willing to fight. Patroclus and his comrades managed to drive the Trojans from the Greek camp, but he made the terrible mistake of confronting Hector on the battlefield, despite being warned by Achilles not to do so. Patroclus was killed by the great Trojan hero, and he also took Achilles' armor. The pain Achilles felt after losing his beloved friend sparked a great desire for revenge in the hero's heart. He returned to the battlefields, where many brave Trojans fell before the bloodlust and vengeance of Peleus' son. The hero Aeneas attempted to battle the unbeatable Achaean. but would have lost his life had not Aphrodite interfered and saved the life of her beloved son. The blood of the Trojans killed by Achilles flowed into the river Scamander, dyeing the waters red. This angered the river god. Scamander lost his patience when Achilles invaded his waters to pursue his enemies. The mighty river created a great water wall and almost drowned the hero. But Hephaestus intervened, sparking fiery flames that dried up part of the river. Achilles was saved from certain death. His ultimate challenge was before him. Hector, the best fighter among the Trojans and Patroclus' executioner, was now within reach of his spear. Hector tried to reach an agreement with Achilles, whereby the defeated would receive an honorable funeral. But Achilles retorted that an agreement between lions and men was hopeless. The great fight between Achilles and Hector was so important that it has been sung by poets for millennia. With one perfect blow, Achilles mortally wounded the Trojan prince. After the hero's death, all hope of victory for the Trojans vanished. Achilles tied the corpse's feet to the war chariot and dragged Hector's body around Troy so that everyone could see the demise of their beloved champion. In his tent, Achilles was visited at night by King Priam of Troy, who knelt at the hero's feet, begging him to hand his son's body back to him. Achilles was moved by this gesture and allowed the king to take his son's body to have a funeral worthy of a great hero. Throughout his campaign at Troy, Achilles became a peerless hero. He fought on the front lines with a fearsome fury, slaughtering all who dared to challenge him. He would go on to duel and defeat the brave Penthesilea, queen of the Amazons, and Memnon, the black demigod from Ethiopia. Achilles seemed invulnerable, but fate struck him down with a single arrow, shot by the Trojan prince Paris and guided by the god Apollo. Achilles died not in battle, but from a sneaky blow to his only weak spot, the heel. All the Achaean heroes mourned the death of the greatest of all Greek heroes. His burning pyre lit up the Trojan night. Sometime after the great warrior's passing, a new warrior appeared on the shores of Troy, who looked like Achilles reborn. He was Pyrrhus, son of the hero. The young man inherited his father's courage and taste for battle, and was one of the warriors who invaded Troy on the wooden horse belly. He lived up to the bravery of his father's legacy. And so ended the story of one of Greece's greatest heroes. The Trojan prince Paris was a key figure in the Trojan War. He triggered events that shaped the fate of many legendary heroes, spawning one of the most poetic and tragic conflicts of antiquity, the Trojan War. He is often depicted as a young and strikingly beautiful man whose questionable decisions led to the fall of Troy. Yet his fault for his choices is open to question, as he was born under the cover of a dark prophecy that marked him out as the future responsible for the ruin of Troy, a prediction that troubled the hearts of his parents, King Priam and Queen Hecuba. When he was born, the joy that would have been expected in the royal palace was replaced by a tension-filled silence, as the oracles had announced that the young prince would be the culprit behind his hometown's annihilation. Haunted by what might happen, Priam decided to abandon his newborn son, hoping that by doing so, they could alter the fate set by the gods. Little Paris was abandoned on the slopes of Mount Ida and was expected to perish far from the Trojan walls. But the fate woven by the Moirai, with their inextricable threads, led him to another plot. Paris was initially adopted by a she-bear and later found by a kind shepherd, who, oblivious to the baby's real identity, took him in as his own son. The shepherd Achilles taught him the ways of the fields and forests, raising Paris in a rural environment awash with love and care. Under Achilles' tutelage, Paris grew up healthy and strong, distinguished by his exceptional beauty and natural charm, qualities that would later play a key role in his tumultuous life. Paris endured a lesser-known but deeply significant chapter in his love life. During his youth spent among the grasslands and forests of Mount Ida, Paris became romantically involved with the nymph Oenone, an alluring figure from Greek mythology, daughter of the river god Serban. She was known for her exceptional beauty and prophetic abilities, besides being an expert in the healing arts. Not only was she his lover, but also a counselor and confidant. The nymph loved Paris with a profound and genuine passion, predicting through her musical abilities the dark contours of Paris's future. She often warned him about the ramifications of his impulsive actions and the tragic consequences that could arise from poorly considered decisions. The trial of Paris is probably one of the most well-known and decisive episodes in his life. This story starts with a quarrel between the goddesses during Peleus and Thetis's wedding, to which the goddess of discord Eris was not invited. To retaliate, she tossed a golden apple inscribed with the words, "For the most beautiful one among the guests," unleashing a vain dispute between Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. Paris was elected to settle this conflict. He was confronted with having to make a choice that would not only define his future, but also that of his hometown. Each goddess offered him a powerful bribe. Hera promised him political power and rule over all nations. Athena offered unrivaled wisdom and prowess in battle. And the goddess of love, Aphrodite, promised him the heart of the world's most beautiful woman, Helen of Sparta. Captivated by Aphrodite's promise, Paris declared the goddess of love to be the most beautiful. His decision would have catastrophic consequences, as the goddesses he had spurned would never forget such humiliation. After years spent living under Achilles' care and enjoying a simple, country existence as a shepherd on Mount Ida, Paris's fate was altered forever when his bull was taken at the behest of the Trojan state to be the prize for the winner of the games held in honor of the birth of a new Trojan prince. Paris decided to join the games to retrieve his prized animal. But before leaving, Oenone warned him that if he left for Troy, he would be following a path that would drive them apart, and that they would only meet again when it was too late. He excelled in these competitions, surpassing many of the noble Trojans in displays of strength and skill. The prophetess Cassandra saw in him the lost brother whose fate had been predicted. She wanted him dead and urged her brothers to kill the young man who was trying to humiliate the Trojan royals during the games. Paris's parents, perceiving Cassandra's exasperation, sensed that something was wrong. When they looked closer at the boy, the king and queen recognized the son they thought was dead. This revelation shocked everyone, including Paris himself, who found himself suddenly elevated from a pastoral position to that of a prince of one of the wealthiest and most powerful cities of that era. Notwithstanding his prophetic concerns, Paris was accepted into Trojan court life, taking his place as prince. He was educated in arts of war and diplomacy, preparing himself to play his role in Trojan society. Influenced by Aphrodite, who had promised Paris the love of the world's most beautiful woman as a reward for giving her the apple of discord, Paris landed in Sparta. There, he was welcomed by Menelaus, the king of Sparta, and his wife Helen, known for her breathtaking beauty. During Menelaus's absence, who had traveled to Crete for his grandfather's funeral, Paris and Helen fell in love. Or, according to some versions, Helen was enticed or even forced to flee with the Trojan prince. Paris's return to Troy with Helen was a point of no return. The abduction was considered a crime in Greek eyes, and such an insult to Menelaus's honor called for reparation. Enraged and dishonored, Menelaus pleaded with his powerful brother Agamemnon, and together they rallied an alliance of Greek states, preparing for a military campaign against Troy. This consortium of Hellenic forces encompassed some of the most notable heroes of the time, such as Achilles, Odysseus, Diomedes, and Ajax, each bringing their own troops and ships to the campaign. Paris was known for his archery expertise, a weapon that required both precision and technique. He was an outstanding archer, able to hit targets at impressive distances, which made him a deadly threat in long-distance combat. This skill conferred him a strategic advantage, allowing him to contribute to the defense of Troy without necessarily engaging in the brutal hand-to-hand combat that was common at the time. Yet Paris's flaws were just as pronounced as his abilities. As opposed to his brother Hector, he lacked the same courage or sword skills, and was often seen as less willing to put his neck on the line. His hesitancy in close combat and his apparent inability to cope with the brutality of head-on fighting were often criticized by his fellow Trojans and Greek opponents. This perception gave him an overbearing and cowardly reputation that contrasted with the bravery and sacrifice of other Trojan and Greek heroes. One of Paris's most memorable battle feats was his direct confrontation with Menelaus, Helen's betrayed husband. This duel was set up as an attempt to settle an almost 10-year conflict, with the winner bringing Helen home and potentially ending the war. When the two clashed, the difference in skill and bravery quickly became evident. Menelaus had the edge, outclassing Paris with his superior hand-to-hand combat skills and the anger of a betrayed man. Outmatched in every way, Paris was humbled and dragged by his helmet in front of everyone, and only survived due to divine intervention. In keeping with her promise to protect him, Aphrodite wrapped him in a dense mist and took him back to Troy, far away from Menelaus's vengeful hands. This made it clear that, despite his archery skills, he lacked the same heroism and virtues of the great warriors who fought in front of the Trojan walls. Paris's finest achievement in the Trojan War is surely the moment when he kills Achilles, the greatest of the Greek warriors. He had been dipped in the Styx by his mother, the nymph Thetis, which made him immortal, except for his heel, by which she held him during the ritual. The war seemed to be leaning in favor of the Greeks, with Achilles conducting devastating raids against the Trojans, until one act changed the entire conflict. During one of the many skirmishes, Achilles was caught up in a fierce battle near the Trojan gates. Paris, often sidelined as a warrior due to his preference for the bow and the safe distance it provided, spotted an opportunity. With Apollo's help, who guided his hand, he fired an arrow which, with divine accuracy, hit Achilles exactly in his heel, the only point where he was vulnerable. Achilles' death at Paris's hands was fraught with irony and significance. Often seen as the least heroic of the Trojan princes, Paris succeeded in killing the greatest of Greek warriors, a feat that no one expected of him. This was a huge blow to the Greeks and gave the Trojans a brief but significant respite in the war. Yet Achilles' murder also bolstered the negative reputation of Paris, as he used a fighting technique deemed less noble, reflecting his cowardice. Paris met his demise during the final days of the Trojan War, not at the hands of a famous Greek hero, but as a result of a wound inflicted by Philoctetes, a Greek archer who had arrows poisoned with Lernaean hydra blood, a gift from Heracles. Gravely wounded and staring imminent death in the face, Paris was seized by a desperate need to find a cure for the hydra's poison. He begged to be taken back to Mount Ida, where his first love, the nymph Oenone, was living. Paris hoped that her healing abilities would save his life, even though he had forsaken her for Helen. Consumed by sorrow and resentment, she refused to help him. Paris died on the way back to Troy, and a great pyre was built for the hero's funeral. Seized by remorse after his death, Oenone decided she had nothing left to live with. She tragically threw herself onto the funeral pyre where Paris's body was now burning. His death was a symbolic occurrence, signaling not only the end of his own saga, but also the beginning of Troy's downfall. His figure is still controversial to this day, a tragic hero driven by love for some, a symbol of cowardice and the destruction wrought by reckless desire for others. During a time when the fate of men was shaped by the gods' whims, there rose Agamemnon, the Lion King of Mycenae, the son of King Atreus and Queen Arope. He was born into a bloodline steeped in violence and revenge. His father Atreus had been the victim of a dreadful betrayal by his own brother Thyestes, sparking a bloody curse that hung over the family. Agamemnon and his brother Menelaus were raised under the burden of this legacy. Agamemnon's childhood was suddenly cut short by his father's betrayal and murder at the hands of his mother's lover, Aegisthus. The young princes had to flee Mycenae, finding shelter at the court of Tyndareus, king of Sparta. There they found safety and protection, growing up under the king's tutelage and alongside his beautiful daughters Helen and Clytemnestra. His ambition and untamed spirit meant that Agamemnon was not happy with exile. He longed for the throne of Mycenae, his birthright. Aided by Menelaus and the Spartan army, he marched against Aegisthus, defeating the usurper and reclaiming the throne that was rightfully his. Reaching the zenith of his power, Agamemnon cemented his rule over Mycenae and extended his influence throughout Greece. He married Clytemnestra, daughter of Tyndareus, firmly entrenching his alliance with Sparta. This marriage gave birth to fruitful offspring that included Iphigenia, Electra, Orestes, and Chrysothemis, heirs to a golden and tragic legacy. Agamemnon's rise to power coincided with a turning point in Greek history, the oath of Tyndareus. Attracted by Helen's matchless beauty, countless suitors gathered in Sparta to compete for her hand. Under Odysseus' advice, Tyndareus, fearful of the consequences of his choice, ordered all the suitors to pledge to defend Helen's future husband against any threat. Together with other heroes such as Odysseus and Achilles, Agamemnon took the oath, sealing his fate and that of Greece in a pact of blood and honor through the holy sacrifice of a horse. Agamemnon, the Lion King of Mycenae, found himself on top of his power, with a prosperous kingdom, a family, and an alliance that made him the most prominent leader in Greece. Agamemnon's kingdom's peace and prosperity were brought to an abrupt halt by the echo of an event that would shake the very foundations of the Greek world: Helen's abduction, the wife of his brother Menelaus, by the Trojan prince Paris. Tyndareus' oath, once a distant promise, turned into a call to arms, a sacred duty to defend honor and family. As the most powerful Greek king and leader of the alliance forged in Sparta, Agamemnon donned the mantle of supreme commander. He rallied Helen's former suitors and other Greek leaders, assembling a colossal army of legendary heroes, such as Achilles, Odysseus, Ajax, and Diomedes, each leading their own troops and ships. Greece joined together under Agamemnon's baton, ready to launch a bloody war against Troy in pursuit of revenge and Helen's return. But the Greek fleet came up against an unforeseen obstacle. The winds would not blow, preventing the ships from setting sail. The seer Calchas unveiled the cause of the divine wrath. The goddess of the hunt, Artemis, demanded a sacrifice, none other than Iphigenia, his own daughter. She was calling for retribution since the powerful nobleman had killed one of her sacred animals and even equated himself with the gods. In a cruel dilemma, Agamemnon was torn between the love for his daughter and his duty to his kingdom and the Greek alliance. Ultimately, the decision he made, perhaps the most difficult of his life, would scar him forever as a ruthless leader and a tormented father. With a heavy heart, he consented to sacrificing Iphigenia, duping his wife Clytemnestra by luring her to Aulis under the pretext of a marriage to Achilles. Iphigenia's death on the sacrificial altar placated Artemis's wrath, allowing the Greek fleet to finally set sail for Troy. But the sacrifice marked a deep wound in Agamemnon's soul and sowed the seeds of discord in his marriage to Clytemnestra, vowing revenge for her daughter's death. The Trojan War raged for 10 long and bloody years. As supreme commander, Agamemnon endured constant challenges. He led the Greeks in countless battles, courageously and strategically. But his pride and fiery temper also caused friction with other heroes, especially Achilles, Greece's most powerful warrior. War loot, a symbol of victory and glory, became the breeding ground for discord between the supreme commander Agamemnon and Achilles, Greece's most formidable warrior. Following a victorious battle, Agamemnon and Achilles were given 2 young captives as part of the booty: Chryses, the daughter of a priest of Apollo, and Briseis, an exceptionally beautiful princess. Achilles, profoundly attracted to Briseis, viewed her as more than just a slave. He treated her with respect and fondness, while her presence was reassuring in the face of all the brutal warfare. On the other hand, Agamemnon saw Chryses as a symbol of his status and power. Chryses' father and a priest of Apollo, reached the Greek camp begging for his daughter's release. He offered a generous ransom, but Agamemnon, struck by pride, refused to free the young woman, humiliating the priest and challenging Apollo's authority. Apollo's wrath was expressed in a devastating pestilence that ravaged the Greek army. Soldiers were falling ill and dying in droves, with despair spreading through the camp. Calchas, the Greek army's seer, inspired by Apollo, revealed the cause of the plague and the only remedy for it: give Chryses back to her father and appease the god's wrath. Confronted with this prophecy and the growing pressure from his men, Agamemnon was forced to yield. But his wounded pride called for reparation. In a petty act of revenge, he ordered Briseis, Achilles' sweetheart, to be taken as his own slave. Agamemnon's decision ignited Achilles' wrath. Dishonored and betrayed by his leader, he swore to withdraw from the battle and no longer fight on the Greek side. The discord between both heroes reached its peak, dividing their army and threatening the war's outcome. Agamemnon's hubris and Achilles' anger, fostered by divine intervention, plunged the Greek camp into a deep crisis. Achilles' absence from action made victory over Troy increasingly remote. Once a matter of honor and revenge, the war became a battleground for bruised egos and the struggle for power, bringing devastating consequences for everyone involved. The war raged on without Achilles, and the Greeks sustained heavy casualties. The absence of their greatest warrior was acutely felt with each battle, and victory seemed ever more difficult. In his reluctance, Agamemnon started to understand his error of judgment. Pride and revenge had blurred his reason, jeopardizing the fate of the war and his men's lives. Reconciliation became evident, but the road to peace was uncertain. With his pride swallowed, Agamemnon set about making an even greater sacrifice, returning Briseis to Achilles, with the hope of convincing him to return to battle. The fate of the war and Greece's future hinged on the ability of both heroes to overcome their differences and join forces against their common enemy. Fortunately for Agamemnon, the death of Patroclus, Achilles' inseparable friend, killed by the Trojan prince Hector, led Achilles and his Myrmidon warriors back to the battlefield. After 10 years of bloody war, Greek cleverness finally triumphed. The wooden horse strategy allowed them to sneak into the city, opening the gates to the army waiting outside. The fall of Troy was ruthless and merciless. It was sacked and burned, its inhabitants massacred or enslaved. But the Greek victory came at a high price, with the loss of countless heroes and the destruction of a glorious city. As supreme commander, Agamemnon headed the war booty division. He claimed Cassandra, the Trojan princess and prophetess, whose beauty and prophetic gifts captivated him. With ships packed with treasure and captives, he set off back to Mycenae, anxious to return to his kingdom and revel in the glory of his victory. Yet revenge awaited Agamemnon in Mycenae. His wife, Clytemnestra, never forgave the sacrifice of her daughter Iphigenia. During Agamemnon's long absence, she conspired with Aegisthus, her lover and Agamemnon's cousin, to murder the king and seize the Mycenaean throne. Agamemnon's return was welcomed with a feigned display of joy and a welcoming banquet. While Agamemnon was taking a bath, unsuspecting and tired from the long journey, Clytemnestra and Aegisthus brutally attacked and murdered him. Helpless to avoid the fate she had foreseen, Cassandra was also killed. Agamemnon's murder heralded the end of an era and the dawn of a bloody vengeance cycle that would haunt the house of Atreus for generations. Orestes, Agamemnon's son, prompted by filial duty and the fury of the gods, was to return to Mycenae and avenge his father's death by killing Clytemnestra and Aegisthus, fulfilling the relentless cycle of violence and tragedy that characterized the lineage of Atreus. Agamemnon's tale is one of ambition, power, sacrifice, and revenge. He was a powerful leader, a valiant warrior, and an ambitious king, but also a man plagued by misjudgments and the cruelty of fate. His role in the Trojan War brought him glory, but his hubris and his thirst for power led to his downfall. Menelaus, the noble warrior and disciple of Ares, emerged from the matchless city of Sparta. As its king, he became the leading role of one of the most famous tales in world history. Menelaus, the son of the cursed Atreus and brother of Agamemnon, the most powerful of the Greek kings, was known for his strong sense of honor and duty. He was destined to play a significant role in the epic tale of men and gods. Besides his impressive skills as a warrior, Menelaus was also renowned for his exceptional physical appearance. As a result of his striking beauty, he was selected by Helen, the princess of Sparta, to be her spouse. However, his marriage to Helen, who was considered the most beautiful woman of all, brought both blessings and misfortunes. Their love for each other was the cause of the Trojan War, a conflict that had a significant impact on the fate of kings and nations. Menelaus once journeyed to Troy, where he was warmly welcomed by Prince Paris. The hospitality shown to him was so great that he felt compelled to return the favor. But Menelaus was unaware of the mistake he was making. During Paris's visit to the court of Sparta, he took advantage of his host's absence, as he had to attend his grandfather's funeral. Paris kidnapped the queen and stole her possessions. This act was considered vile. Menelaus was filled with anger and turned to his brother for assistance in enforcing the oath taken by the Greek nobles. These had promised to uphold Helen's marriage to the man of her choice. The Greek nobles fulfilled their promise and sailed across the Aegean Sea with several ships filled with warriors, all headed towards the Trojan coast. Their goal was to rescue Helen and thereby salvage the honor of all Greece. Menelaus was a formidable warrior and an inspiring leader who stood out on the battlefields in front of the Trojan walls. He persisted despite the wrath of the gods and the unyielding resistance of the Trojans. Guided by his courage, honor, and love for Helen, he navigated through the darkness of war, relentlessly pursuing justice. After years of war, Menelaus was finally going to engage in a one-on-one duel with the man who had abducted his wife. The formidable follower of Ares exerted his dominance over his foe throughout the entire duel. From the very beginning, Paris trembled with fear in the presence of the imposing hero. If it weren't for the gods, who made his sword break upon striking the head of the adulterous prince, Menelaus would have succeeded in killing Paris. He continued to drag Paris by the helmet, humiliating him in front of both Greeks and Trojans. But Paris could rely on Aphrodite. She formed a dense cloud around him, allowing Paris to evade a fatal attack. Menelaus was outraged by Paris's escape. After all, it had been agreed that the winner of the duel would be awarded possession of Helen of Troy. Pandarus, the Trojan archer, deceitfully shot an arrow at Menelaus, causing a severe injury. He managed to recover and join the Hellenic vanguard to fight again. The courageous Spartan king was one of the valiant warriors who hid inside the wooden horse, built to delude the Trojans and launch an invasion of the city. Menelaus and other heroes advanced towards the royal palace in search of Helen after invading the city. He found that his wife had remarried Prince Deiphobus after Paris's death during the war. Menelaus slew Deiphobus with the same intensity that he would have used to butcher Paris. The king of Sparta entered the Trojan palace to kill his wife. However, when he saw his beloved Helen, he found himself unable to fully carry out his revenge. After forgiving Helen, Menelaus brought her back to Greece, his true homeland. This act restored the honor of all of Hellas. The tale of Menelaus, which is intertwined with the legends of the greatest heroes and gods, continues to be told to this day. It is recounted in verse and sung by poets, serving as a testament to the enduring strength of love, honor, and vengeance. As great heroes were proving their worth fighting outside the Trojan walls, there rose the legend of a champion who challenged the limits of fate with courage, honor, and unshakable strength. This was Memnon, the valiant black warrior, son of the goddess of dawn Eos and the mortal Tithonus. In faraway and mysterious lands, Memnon was raised under the tender care of his divine mother and the wisdom of his mortal father. His skin was dark ebony. From an early age, he learned the art of war, mastering the spear, sword, and bow and arrow. His courage on the battlefield was boundless, and his voice of command sounded like thunder, commanding and inspiring allies and terrifying enemies. His fame soon spread across the ancient world, and Memnon came to be known as the fighter whose courage was second to none and whose heart was righteous. However, when the grim days of the Trojan War came, during which heroes and gods faced each other in an epic battle that rocked the foundations of the earth and of Olympus, Memnon, true to his friendship with the noble Priam, king of Troy, and intent on restoring the honor of that besieged city, led his valiant army of Ethiopian warriors to Trojan soil, willing to face the terrifying Greek coalition. At his arrival, the Trojan hearts were revived with hope, and it seemed that the tide of war had turned. Like a tempest of fury and courage, Memnon struck down countless enemies, his blade bathed in the blood of Greek warriors, and his spear streaking through the air like lightning. During the raging battle, Memnon killed Antilochus, son of old Nestor and a great friend of Achilles. This act brought him into a head-on collision course with the great son of Peleus, the most powerful Greek warrior, with legendary strength and speed, who wished to avenge his friend's murder. In one epic duel, the blades of the two combatants clashed, and heaven and earth seemed to shake with the clash between these titans. The fight between these two sons of gods was grueling and ferocious. Their divine mother stood before Zeus and asked the supreme god to favor their son. But the great deity did not dare to meddle in the fate traced out by the Moirai. The heroes exchanged blows, and the Ethiopian prince even struck the hero whom the Greeks judged unassailable. But the son of Thetis reacted, and in one fateful blow, Achilles mortally wounded Memnon, who collapsed, drawing his last breath on the blood-soaked ground. The brave black warrior met his end, just like a wounded lion who braved his fate with courage and honor. But Memnon's legend was not quenched by his death. His mother, the goddess Eos, in her pain and suffering, implored Zeus to grant immortality to her beloved son. Deeply moved by the goddess's distress, the mighty Zeus granted her request, and in an act of divine mercy, turned Memnon's body into an army of birds, the Memnonides. These, each year, return to the battlefield to honor the hero's memory and revive his eternal struggle against fate. This is how Memnon's saga, the Iliad's Black Warrior, has been perpetuated throughout the ages. Memnon, the Ethiopian hero, lives forever in the pantheon of the ancient great warriors, a monument to the courage and nobility of those who struggled and gave their lives in their quest for justice and glory. Born into greatness, Ajax, son of King Telamon and the beautiful Paraboea, grew up on the fertile lands of the island of Salamis, bathed by the waters of the Aegean Sea. From an early age, he exhibited extraordinary skills in the art of warfare, becoming a master of the spear and shield. Even at an early age, he already flashed signs of the courage and leadership that would later make him famous. His colossal stature and titanic strength were legendary, surpassed only by his unwavering courage and sense of duty. His name echoed through the battlefields like thunder, inspiring allies and terrifying enemies. As a teenager, the young Ajax, heir to the island of Salamis, crossed paths with the immortal Achilles, who would become the most accomplished Greek warrior. United by honor and camaraderie, these two titans shared knowledge and honed skills under the tutelage of the wise centaur Chiron. The two learned the art of war and forged their character, tempering their hearts with the bravery and nobility that would make them eternal legends. Challenging each other in earnest combat and races, Ajax and Achilles established an unbreakable friendship, cultivating the strength and skill that would carry them through the challenges and trials of war, united by the invisible thread of destiny. The dark days of the Trojan War arrived, a conflict where warriors and gods fought an epic battle for the fate of a torn world. Ajax, faithful to the honor and friendship he had with the noble King Menelaus and his brother Agamemnon, led his mighty army from Salamis to the mighty city of Troy, willing to face those who would defend it. On the battlefield, Ajax proved to be invincible, a brave and destructive hurricane, shooting down enemies with his deadly spear and protecting allies with his impenetrable shield. He was so strong that even the great Achilles, the most feared warrior of Greece, considered him his equivalent in bravery and skill. The war lasted for many terrible years. Ajax encountered countless trials and adversities. He fought the Trojan hero Hector in a legendary duel, the result of which was an honorable draw. At a crucial juncture of the Trojan War, when the flames of despair threatened to engulf the Greek camp and their towering ships, the colossal Ajax the Great, ruthless protector of the Hellenic forces, entered the scene. Like an unshakable rampart before the Trojan hordes, he brandished his huge shield and deadly spear, facing his enemies with the fury of a titan and the heart of a lion. His roar echoed through the battlefield, urging the Greek warriors to fight with renewed courage and determination. While the Trojans charged like a stormy sea, Ajax stood firm, a beacon of hope and resistance, protecting the ships and the camp with grit and faith in his cause. On that dreary day, fate surrendered before the bravery and honor of Ajax the Great, whose shield became a symbol of heroism and protection for all who fought alongside him. When the hero Achilles met his tragic end, abandoned by the gods and betrayed by fate, the untamed figure of Ajax the Great emerged. Learning of the downfall of his friend and brother in arms, he fearlessly entered the heart of the conflict, guided by the silent oath to rescue Achilles' body and weapons, protecting his immortal memory. With the legendary strength and determination of a hero, Ajax rescued Achilles' body from the hands of the Trojans. But even the greatest heroes are not impervious to fate. Late in the war, Ajax had a bitter dispute with his ally Odysseus over the right to own the late Achilles' weapons. The dispute ended in tragedy. Ajax, driven mad by the gods and devoured by rage and despair, had a fit of senseless wrath, where he imagined he was tearing apart the sons of Atreus, Menelaus, and Agamemnon, and lashing out at Odysseus. But his mind had been clouded by Athena, and Ajax only flogged the sacrificial rams. The colossal hero could not bear the shame and hurled himself against the sword that once defended Greece. The deeds of the great Ajax of Salamis are still vivid in the souls of those who seek true glory, facing adversity with courage and honor, guided by the love of justice and loyalty to fellow men. Helen of Troy is undoubtedly one of Greek mythology's most well-known personalities, a woman whose beauty sent 1,000 ships crammed with warriors to Troy, and whose abduction triggered one of mythology's most iconic wars. Helen was born to Zeus and Leda, Queen of Sparta, but this was quite an unusual pairing. She was basking by a pond when a beautiful swan came to perform its water ballet. When an eagle attempted to attack the beautiful swan, it ran into the arms of the Queen of Sparta to protect itself. Leda felt the touch of the bird's soft feathers and plumes. However, the naive princess was unaware that this gorgeous swan was Zeus transformed into a bird. The swan-shaped god bonded with the young queen and deposited his divine seed in her. To everyone's surprise, the queen laid 2 eggs, one of which gave birth to Helen and Pollux, Zeus's children, and the other to Castor and Clytemnestra, children of Tyndareus, Leda's husband and king of Sparta. As Helen grew up, her beauty became more striking every day. No man remained unimpressed by the young princess's charms. The Spartan princess was surrounded by suitors, all vying for the world's most beautiful woman. One of these men, however, was much bolder than the others, King Theseus of Athens, who had already grown old and put his best years behind him. With his friend Pirithous, Theseus abducted the beautiful young princess of Sparta and sought to make her his new wife. Princess Helen was thus kidnapped for the first time, Theseus and Pirithous drew lots to determine who would be fortunate enough to marry the world's most beautiful woman, but they were unaware that the gods already had other plans for her. Theseus won, but he would not let his friend go without anything, and guaranteed that he would help him win a divinely beautiful woman who would also be Zeus's daughter. The two reckless heroes set off for the underworld in search of its queen, Persephone. Theseus and Pirithous were eventually captured by Hades, Persephone's husband and lord of the underworld. They became his prisoners in that frightening kingdom. Helen's brothers, Castor and Pollux, launched a quest to rescue their sister, who had been held prisoner in Athens. The Spartans rejoiced at the return of their princess, who was considered one of Greece's finest jewels. But King Tyndareus of Sparta feared that such beauty would cause the noble Greeks to fight among themselves over Helen's ownership. However, the Spartan king was aided by the crafty King Odysseus of Ithaca, who produced an elaborate plan to remedy his worries. Following Odysseus's instructions, King Tyndareus proclaimed that he would allow Helen to choose her future husband from among the noblemen present, provided they vowed to uphold Helen's marriage to her chosen one. They accepted, making the oath together by sacrificing a horse, symbolizing that such an agreement would be impossible to break. Helen thoroughly evaluated the suitors from all over Greece, and after reviewing them all, she decided on the charming Menelaus from the house of Atreus. The simple-minded princess of Sparta chose her husband for his beauty, and Odysseus and the king were relying on this naivety. Besides being good-looking, Menelaus was also the brother of the mighty King Agamemnon of Mycenae, and no other king in Greece would challenge the brother of such a powerful man. Helen and Menelaus's marriage appeared to be going well, but her fate was being decided far away. Prince Paris of Troy, across the Aegean Sea, was entrusted with choosing the most beautiful of the goddesses in an event that came to be known as the Trial of Paris. He elected Aphrodite as the most beautiful because she had promised him the love of the world's most beautiful woman, none other than Queen Helen of Sparta. The Moirai, the goddesses of destiny, sent Prince Paris to Sparta on an official mission on behalf of his father, King Priam of Troy. Menelaus welcomed him warmly and introduced his beautiful wife to the visitor. Upon glimpsing the gorgeous foreign prince, the princess's heart was struck by an arrow from Eros, fulfilling his mother's wish, the goddess Aphrodite, who in turn kept her promise to the prince. Once Menelaus left to attend his grandfather's funeral on the island of Crete, he entrusted his guest to the care of his wife. He never knew it, but he was committing the worst mistake of his life. Soon after he left, Paris and Helen unleashed their pent-up passion. In one impulsive step, Paris kidnapped the Spartan queen and took her and Menelaus's treasures to Troy. The betrayed King Menelaus ordered his brother, the powerful King Agamemnon of Mycenae, to convince all the Greek kings to fulfill the oath taken over the body of the quartered horse. Thousands of Greek ships set sail for Troy to rescue Helen and bring back the honor of all Greece. Helen had become the focus point of a conflict that would ultimately decide the fate of two great kingdoms. The high-walled Trojan city became the stage for a decade-long war, all due to the burning passion between Helen and Paris. But life in Troy was hardly the romantic indulgence that Helen could have imagined. She found herself divided between her love for Paris and nostalgia for her homeland. She was burdened by the consequences of her actions as war ravaged the lands around Troy. Poets often depict Helen watching the battle from the Trojan walls, her heart wrenched as she witnessed the devastation her decision had wrought. She also experienced the resentment of many Trojans, who saw her as the cause of all their misery. Helen lived in Troy for 10 years and was dubbed Helen of Troy by King Priam himself. But time also led her to regret having followed Paris to Troy more and more every day. During one of the most remarkable moments of the Trojan War, Paris dared the Greeks to face him in one-on-one combat. When Menelaus volunteered to face him on the condition that the winner would be entitled to possession of Helen, Paris's courage faded, and he hid behind his powerful brother Hector. Urged by Hector to fight for Trojan honor, Paris confronted Menelaus. The Spartan king humiliated the Trojan before everyone by beating him brutally, even going so far as to drag the prince by his helmet. But, owing to Aphrodite's intervention, Paris escaped the duel alive and found refuge in the royal palace. The Trojan prince revealed his cowardice and refused to return to the battlefield, angering Helen and making her regret her choice. Aphrodite, however, could not allow her love for Paris to disappear completely, as the goddess had promised the love of the Spartan queen to the Trojan hero. Paris died during the conflict, from an arrow shot by the Greek hero Philoctetes. His death made Helen's fate even more difficult. Priam's children went on to fight for the right to take Helen as their wife, and this made the Trojan women's loathing for Helen grow even more. Prince Deiphobus decided to win the internal dispute over Helen, and she became subject to his will. During the final stages of the Trojan War, Helen exposed Odysseus, who had infiltrated Troy as a spy, but decided not to denounce him to the Trojans. The king of Ithaca succeeded in stealing the Palladium which protected the city. After 10 long years of conflict, the Trojan War would have its bloody outcome with the Trojan horse ruse. The Greeks stormed the city while hidden in the wooden horse's belly and unleashed a bloodbath. Menelaus invaded the royal palace in search of his treacherous wife. Since Paris had already died, Deiphobus fell victim to the Spartan king's vengeance. More than anything, Menelaus wished to shed the blood of the woman who had dishonored him. When he came face to face with his wife, she offered her body to the Spartan king's blade. He wavered and could not bring himself to do it. Menelaus then forgave Helen and took her back to her homeland. Alongside her husband, she resumed her role as queen and was once again called Helen of Sparta. Helen's story is not just one of a strikingly beautiful woman, but also of a tragic character whose decisions and fate were frequently wrested out of her hands. She is best remembered both for the war her beauty caused and the suffering she bore. The story of Helen of Troy has been sung and retold throughout the ages, reminding us of how powerful human passions can be when it comes to shaping and destroying the fate of a person and even a nation. The fearless Trojan prince, Hector, was the second most important figure in the Trojan War, epitomizing courage, honor, loyalty, and patriotism. Not only was he a skilled warrior, but he was also a compassionate leader and a devoted family member. His tale is a journey of bravery, sacrifice, and tragedy. Today's video will look at Hector's life, from his youth to his last days in the Trojan War, unraveling the facets of a hero whose legacy has transcended time and continues to inspire generations. Hector was born into the glorious Trojan royal family, the son of King Priam and Queen Hecuba. From an early age, he was meant to be more than just a prince. His education was carefully planned to prepare him as a leader and warrior. Taught by the best masters in Troy, Hector acquired remarkable skills in military strategy and combat. As well as his martial training, he was given a wide-ranging education, learning about culture, history, and diplomacy, all essential qualities for a future king. Brought up in an atmosphere of strong tradition and cultural heritage, Hector grew up with a profound sense of duty and responsibility towards his people and city. His values were molded not only by formal education, but also by the role models of honor and courage displayed by his ancestors and his family's teachings. Hector's youth was a blend of harsh training and the development of a righteous character. As the heir apparent to the Trojan throne, Hector held a crucial role in both the political and military spheres in the city. He was revered and loved by his subjects, not only for his competence and bravery, but also for his compassion and justice. His position at the Trojan court was a source of stability and hope, particularly during the stormy times before the Trojan War. The marriage between Hector and Andromache, depicted in the legends as a prime example of marital love and devotion, reinforced his role in Trojan society. Also known for her beauty and wisdom, Andromache became a loyal companion and wise counselor to Hector. They had a son together, Astyanax, whose future was a permanent concern for the couple, considering the uncertainties brought on by the imminent war. As a father, Hector had a deep love and surprising tenderness, in stark contrast to his reputation as a forceful warrior. This twofold character, a feared warrior on the battlefield and a loving father at home, made Hector a thoroughly human personality. His moments with his family provided a glimpse into Hector's personal life, revealing a man who treasured the safety and well-being of his loved ones above everything else. The threat of the Trojan War, however, was looming over Troy. Conscious of his city's and his family's fate, Hector readied himself to fight for his homeland against the Greek forces. When the Trojan War erupted, Hector stood out as the city's main defender. His leadership and martial abilities were second to none, which made him the mainstay of the Trojan resistance against the Greek army. With a blend of cunning tactics and undaunted courage, Hector commanded the Trojans, gaining the admiration of friends and foes alike. His relationship with his brother Paris, whose abduction of Helen triggered the war, was intricate. While often frustrated by Paris's deeds and the consequences they brought to Troy, Hector nevertheless remained a loyal and protective brother. This loyalty stretched to his entire family, including their father King Priam, to whom Hector offered both respect and wise counsel. The clash between the brave Trojan prince Hector and the imposing Greek warrior Ajax is one of the most memorable clashes of the Trojan War. This battle, narrated in the Iliad, is not only a collision of strength and skill, but also a confrontation of honor and bravery between two of the greatest heroes of their respective sides. The duel commenced at sunset, with both armies anxiously watching. Hector, renowned for his agility and tactical savvy, faced Ajax of legendary strength and size. They battled with spears and swords, their weapons clashing in a deadly dance, every blow loaded with force and precision. It was an even contest, with Hector proving his dexterity and Ajax his supernatural endurance. As the battle went on, it became clear that both warriors were similarly skilled, and neither Hector nor Ajax could gain a decisive advantage. The mutual respect grew as fighting went on, with each warrior appreciating the honor and bravery of the other. As night fell, the commanders of both sides worried about the safety of their best warriors and, recognizing the futility of continuing the fight, decided to stop the duel. Ajax and Hector traded gifts as a sign of mutual respect, a rare display of camaraderie amidst the brutal nature of war. Hector's other major achievement in the quarrel was leading the attack that almost succeeded in burning the Greek ships, a move that could have significantly altered the course of the war. His tactics were not only confined to brute force. Hector was also a tactical master of maneuvering and inspiring his men, giving them courage and determination. A watershed moment for Hector during the war came when he faced Patroclus, Achilles' friend and companion in arms. After killing his adversary, he stole Achilles' armor, which the hero had lent to Patroclus. This triggered a chain of events that would lead to his final confrontation with Achilles, a moment that would be one of the most dramatic and tragic of the Trojan War. Consumed by grief and a burning desire for revenge over the death of his beloved friend, Achilles returned to the battlefield with relentless fury. The clash between Hector and Achilles was both inevitable and highly anticipated, both by the combatants and the war bystanders. This duel was not only a matter of strength and skill, but also a clash of ideals and destinies. Hector, although a tremendous warrior, was facing an Achilles driven by a supernatural rage. In the end, he was defeated and killed, an event that shattered the Trojan morale. Hector's death, the noble Trojan prince, was one of the darkest and most emotional moments of the war. Achilles, overwhelmed by a thirst for revenge, defiled his body by dragging it around the Trojan walls. This inhuman act inflicted a deep wound not only on the Trojan royal family, but on the entire city, which looked to Hector as its greatest defender and symbol of hope. The mourning for Hector reverberated throughout Troy, especially in the hearts of his wife Andromache, his son Astyanax, and his parents Priam and Hecuba. The royal family's grief mirrored the despair of a city on the brink of collapse. Watching his beloved son treated with such despicable disregard, King Priam of Troy, eaten up with grief, set out on a dangerous and desperate mission to rescue his son's body from the hands of the enemy. During a silent night, Priam set off on his secret journey to the Greek camp. Once there, he entered Achilles' tent, taking the Greek warrior by surprise. In a moving scene, the old king knelt before Achilles, pleading for the return of his son's body. Priam appealed to Achilles' compassion, reminding him of a father's love for his son and imploring him to remember his own father Peleus. Touched by Priam's pleading, while remembering his own father, Achilles was driven by compassion and agreed to return Hector's body. Both men, an old king and a young warrior, wept together for the losses they had suffered in the war. Achilles ordered Hector's body to be cleaned and prepared for the return to Troy, and offered a temporary ceasefire to allow for a proper funeral. This episode, eternalized in the Iliad, keeps resonating down the centuries as an example of humanity's ability to be empathetic and compassionate, even in times of great pain and despair. When Hector's body was brought back to Troy, the city was submerged in mourning. Andromache, Hector's wife, their son Astyanax, and his mother Hecuba led the city into a deep wail, expressing their grief at the loss of the great hero. Each of them, along with the other Trojans, paid tribute to Hector, celebrating his bravery, honor, and love for his family and city. Hector's funeral was a magnificent ceremony. His body was cremated on a large pyre, and his ashes were gathered and buried with heroes' honors. Hector, the bravest Trojan warrior, was the city's last defense line. His death not only debased the Trojans, but also signaled the inevitability of Troy's fate. Losing its greatest hero left the city vulnerable and hopeless, paving the way for the final events of the Trojan War, culminating in the famous Trojan horse and the city's fall. Hector left a legacy that goes beyond the boundaries of his own story. As the leading Trojan hero, Hector stands for bravery, honor, and devotion to family and civic duties. Unlike many heroes of his time, Hector is distinguished by his balanced character and profound humanity. He was not only a tremendous warrior, but also a loving husband and father, qualities that lend him an emotional depth that is rarely found in mythology.
Greek mythology is teeming with iconic heroes, with decisive roles in the epic battles and adventures of antiquity. Some have been eclipsed by the great deeds of others. Such is the case with Ajax of Locrian, also known as Ajax the Lesser. Although not as famous as the namesake Ajax the Great, the hero Salamis, Ajax the Locrian played a key role in the Trojan War. Ajax the Locrian was the son of Oileus, king of Locris. According to some versions, his mother was Areopis, a daughter of the river Asopus. He was a talented and swift warrior, renowned for his dexterity and agility in combat. Ajax the Locrian was one of the heroes in the Trojan War, fighting on the side of the Achaeans. He led a 40-ship contingent with warriors from Locris, joining the Greek forces led by Agamemnon, king of Mycenae. During the war, Ajax the Locrian was one of the bravest and most talented warriors on the Greek side. He bravely engaged in several battles, displaying great courage and skill in the use of spears and shields. He was responsible for killing Trojan heroes, including Simoisios, son of King Priam. Despite his heroic deeds in battle, Ajax the Locrian is also remembered for an infamous act. During the sack of Troy, he raped Cassandra, daughter of King Priam, inside the temple of Athena. This act angered the goddess, who asked Zeus to punish the desecrator of her temple. Zeus sent a huge storm that completely obliterated the squadron commanded by the warrior from Locris. But Ajax, against all odds, survived the shipwreck. He swam to a rock floating on the water, but the arrogant warrior defied the gods, claiming that even the gods could not stop him from returning home. This blasphemy enraged Poseidon. The god destroyed the rock with his trident, causing Ajax to fall into the waters and drown. This was the end of the life of the foolish hero who defied the gods.
Diomedes, son of the valiant warrior Tydeus, was born amid glory and tragedy. His family was known as much for bravery as for violence. especially because his father had been one of the famed Seven in the ill-fated War of the Seven against Thebes. Tydeus, though admired for courage and fearsome ferocity in battle, met a grim fate, punished by the gods themselves for his unbridled rage. Raised in Argos, Diomedes learned from an early age about honor, courage, and military strategy. Under the care of his mother, Dipyle, and trained by Greece's finest warriors, he became skilled in the use of arms and the arts of war, determined to honor and surpass the complicated legacy left by his father. Throughout his youth, Diomedes lived in the shadow of his father's fame, which brought him both pride and pressure. The people of Argos saw in him a promising hero, with the potential for great deeds and the hope that he would not repeat the mistakes of the past. That mix of expectations profoundly shaped the young warrior, driving him to leave a positive, lasting mark. When the moment finally came, Diomedes was ready not only to fight, but to win his own place among the great Greek heroes, embarking for the legendary Trojan War that would mark his life forever. Even before the war began, Diomedes was bound to the conflict by the oath of Tyndareus. This oath was sworn by Helen's suitors, the most beautiful woman in Greece, pledging to defend whomever she chose. Although Diomedes had no interest in Helen, he took part in that oath, showing early on his honor and commitment to Greek alliances. Thus, when Helen was taken by Paris to Troy, Diomedes did not hesitate to answer the call to war. With the war's onset, Diomedes took command of a powerful contingent of warriors from Argos. Under his leadership, a vast fleet set out for Troy, carrying skilled, well-trained soldiers determined to honor their homeland and win eternal glory on the Trojan battlefields. Diomedes quickly stood out for courage and leadership, showing he was ready to face any challenge the war might bring. During the war, Diomedes formed a deep friendship with Odysseus, king of Ithaca. This partnership was marked by mutual trust, bravery, and strategic intelligence. Together, they carried out dangerous, crucial missions, standing out as an almost unbeatable duo, highly respected among the Greeks. With his exceptional courage, Diomedes did not fear to challenge even the gods themselves on the battlefield. He confronted divinities directly, especially Aphrodite and Ares, displaying unmatched resolve and bravery. A brutal moment in Diomedes' saga came when he faced Pandarus, a famed Trojan archer known for deadly skill. In a fierce duel between the two, Diomedes was struck by an arrow from Pandarus, who moments earlier had also wounded Menelaus, the Spartan king, treacherously breaking the truce between Greeks and Trojans. Encouraged by Athena, Diomedes pressed forward without hesitation and, with astonishing violence, hurled his spear into Pandarus's face, driving it through and causing a swift, terrifying death. But when he tried to strip Pandarus's armor, he had to face Aeneas, who stood to defend the honor of his fallen comrade in arms. Diomedes charged at Aeneas, who was protected by Aphrodite, the goddess of love and the Trojan warrior's mother. Diomedes hurled a heavy stone that shattered Aeneas's hip. Seeing Aeneas in mortal danger, Aphrodite quickly descended to the battlefield to save him. But Diomedes saw in that intervention a unique opportunity. With startling boldness and precision, he cast his spear directly at the goddess's hand, wounding her and forcing her to retreat swiftly to Mount Olympus. For the first time in the war, an Olympian deity bled before mortal eyes, showing the Greeks that even the gods could be vulnerable. Diomedes then advanced again against Aeneas, who remained exposed, but this time he was protected by Apollo. Yet not even the presence of one of the most illustrious Olympians was enough to deter the audacious hero. He tried to strike the radiant god. Again and again he lunged, while the god slipped away from his impetuous blows. Until Apollo lost patience. With a threatening shout, the god declared how foolish it was for a mortal to try to equal a god. Diomedes realized the gods had other plans for Aeneas, and that it was not the Trojan hero's fate to die that day. But Diomedes' bravery and daring were not limited to that episode. On another equally striking occasion, he faced Ares himself, the fearsome god of war, known for unbridled violence and devastating strength. Under Athena's protection and urging, Diomedes did not hesitate to confront Ares face to face. The god of war, lover of Aphrodite, sought to avenge his beloved by taking the life of her assailant. Ares hurled his divine spear at the hero, but the weapon was deflected by Athena, who would not allow her protege to be slain by so vile a god. Emboldened by the goddess, Diomedes launched a powerful counterattack and, guided by Athena, managed to wound the war god in the side, causing him such pain that Ares had to flee to Olympus, abandoning the field. This audacious feat cemented Diomedes' reputation as a legendary warrior, respected and feared by mortals and by the gods alike. Beyond his bravery in battle, Diomedes was also recognized for wisdom and strategic intelligence, especially in war councils among the Greek chieftains. His voice was often heard with attention, for he brought effective plans and balanced decisions, crucial in the war's most critical moments. During a desperate assault led by Hector, Diomedes once again showed exceptional courage and leadership, bravely defending the Greek ships from the Trojan assault. His resolve helped save the ships and ensured the Greeks held their crucial strategic position in the war. One of Diomedes' most memorable missions took place under cover of night, when he and his friend Odysseus slipped into the Thracian camp to seize the famed divine horses of King Rhesus. Moving with stealth and precision, the two heroes managed to penetrate enemy lines undetected. During that daring operation, Diomedes killed King Rhesus, ensuring the enemy could never benefit from the strength of those legendary horses. They then captured the prized animals and led them back to the Greek camp, dealing the Trojans a huge moral blow and once again proving their unmatched courage and skill. Diomedes was one of the central figures in Troy's fall. After the success of the wooden horse stratagem, he led his troops in the brutal assault that resulted in the destruction and sack of the fabled city. After victory, Diomedes faced a hard return to Argos. On his post-war travels, he had to contend with countless hardships, including devastating storms and internal conflicts in his homeland, proof that even after glorious victory, fate continued to test him relentlessly. In his later reflections, already on the Italian peninsula, Diomedes grasped the bitter nature of victory. Despite the glory and honors he had won, he bore the weight of losses, the destruction he had witnessed, and the blood spilled in the name of pride and honor. Looking back, Diomedes understood clearly that true victory lay not only in battles won, but in the ability to live with the scars left by war and the steep price paid by those who endured it.
Palamedes, offspring of the shrewd king Nauplius, entered life not endowed with Hercules' might or Achilles' rage, but possessing one of the keenest intellects throughout Greece. Amid a realm ruled by brawn, javelins, and battle roars, he emerged as the embodiment of insight and logic. From youth, he earned praise for his extraordinary cleverness, his knack for settling quarrels, and his flair for devising innovations. He embodied a champion who refrained from grasping a blade as an initial choice, yet his tactical foresight could shift a conflict's tide. Nevertheless, his tale lacks the imprint of triumphant festivities or monuments raised to his glory. It narrates the journey of a prudent figure in a savage era, a protagonist muted not by Trojan foes, but by the jealousy of his fellow comrades. Palamedes' sorrow stems not solely from his demise, but from the obscurity that ensued thereafter. Hailing from Euboea's Isle, Palamedes inherited a venerable heritage, sired by Nauplius, a seasoned seafarer and monarch versed in oceanic crafts. Early on, though, it became clear that Palamedes would transcend the role of a mere noble heir. As peers honed skills with blades and guards, he found delight in the enigmas of constellations, figures, language, and the subtle harmony within plain objects. Endowed with a luminous and inquisitive spirit, his peers hailed him as the creator of Greek alphabet characters, number systems, and even pastimes like dice and checkers, which doubled as amusement and mental drills for warriors. Within martial domains, his input proved just as precious. He devised methods for distributing provisions, scheduling duties, and relaying messages in the Greek encampment, a quiet yet crucial transformation during wartime. Yet Palamedes faced a formidable adversary, equal in guile and his personal nemesis, named Odysseus, Ithaca's ruler. The friction igniting their enmity flared before Greek vessels embarked toward Troy. When Paris abducted Helen, Ithaca's sovereign, famed for unconventional wisdom, sought to evade the oath of Tyndareus, a vow binding Helen's suitors to defend her selected spouse. Odysseus, freshly wed to Penelope and father to a newborn, harbored no wish to forsake his homeland for a strife that, to him, appeared fueled more by vanity than duty. In a frantic ploy, he feigned insanity. Yoking an ox and donkey to a plow, he tilled fields with salt, staging a bizarre and foolish spectacle, as though reason had fled him. However, Palamedes, ever vigilant to minute clues and doubtful of Ithaca's king's timely lunacy, resolved to probe his lucidity with a chill verging on cruelty. He positioned young Telemachus, Odysseus's child, right before the plow. Were he genuinely mad, the pretended lunatic would trample the infant without pause. Yet Odysseus halted the advance at once, undone by fatherly impulse. The ruse unraveled. The veil of madness dropped, birthing a bitter grudge between them. Public disgrace scarred Odysseus's dignity beyond repair. Though forced to join the Greek venture, he never absolved Palamedes for unveiling his charade before monarchs and champions. From then, a hushed contention sprouted, nourished by resentment, bruised esteem, and suspicion. To Palamedes, it was simply an obligation to uphold the pact's integrity and the Greek mission. To Odysseus, it constituted a personal slight, an affront to his intellect and autonomy. Like any wound poorly mended, a strain would swell until it spilled into calamity. During the protracted and draining siege at Troy's gates, Palamedes swiftly rose as a cornerstone of Greek command. While numerous warriors excelled through vigor or godly descent, he shone via his calculated acumen and capacity to preserve calm amid turmoil. His concepts reshaped the blockade into a more unified endeavor, sparing lives and boosting troop effectiveness. Among fighters, he garnered esteem. Among rulers, admiration mingled often with envy. He was a person who rendered effortless what others dared not contemplate. But his radiance started to irk. Odysseus, though likewise renowned for wit, perceived Palamedes' innate aptitude as a persistent peril. Accolades of sagacity, once nearly sole to Ithaca's lord, now split with another. Beyond sharing, they were frequently credited only to Palamedes. Whispers that he ought to steer councils over Agamemnon stirred among Greek leaders. Such gossip sparked wrath in Agamemnon, who had relinquished much to secure his rank as supreme basileus. Greece's ultimate overseer, used to being the hub of judgments and reverence, grew uneasy as Palamedes' charm and proficiency overshadowed his dominion. Palamedes spoke plainly, settled conflicts without force, and, to ordinary troops, seemed a truer guide than Mycenae's own king. Common folk heeded him. Soldiers trailed him. Chiefs dreaded him. Odysseus, ever crafty, cloaked his spite beneath grins and kind phrases. Yet backstage, he schemed with Agamemnon. Steadily he stoked rumors, planted uncertainties, and waited, akin to one biding time to thrust a blade. Palamedes, trusting in his uprightness, missed the dark veils amassing around him. His chief flaw was presuming war could be won purely by sense and fairness. not foreseeing that, among his own ranks, lurked toxins deadlier than any Trojan shaft. Swayed by conceit and unease, Agamemnon succumbed to the doubts Odysseus sowed. Thus, a scheme unfolded in hush. They crafted a missive, penned under Priam, Troy's king, ostensibly sent to Palamedes. Its words hinted at betrayal. For gold and refuge, the Greek hero would yield military confidences to the adversary. To bolster the forgery's weight, Trojan riches were stashed beneath Palamedes' tent, ensuring the charge bore an undeniable mark. Come morning, the tent faced a search. The letter rang out loud before the chiefs. The treasure surfaced. Palamedes, caught off guard, strove to protest fiercely, but no just hearing or voice was granted. Odysseus stayed mute, feigning grief. Agamemnon upheld the truth of the claim with his office's clout. No other kings ventured to step in. Jealousy and spite prevailed. In his final utterance, he declared no dread of death, but pity for truth, which would perish afore him. Denied a plea, the camp's wisest soul was sentenced to death for treachery. Thus Palamedes met his end, stoned by his own kin. No Trojan lance grazed him. He fell not to foes, but to allies' unfairness. Palamedes' passing was more than an outrage. It gashed the Achaeans' honor wide. Yet amid the hero's complicit quiet, one refused to let such a wrong pass unanswered. Nauplius, father of the doomed. Hearing of his son's stoning, the aged king shed no tears before his court, nor rent his robes as other sires might. Instead, he vowed retribution. Nauplius spread tales of the lavish existence kings led in Troy, with fresh captives they deemed as mates, thus rousing wives to betray their spouses ere their war return. Among them stood Clytemnestra, Agamemnon's bride, who would slay her lord upon his homecoming. Each deceit, each ruin, each shattered hearth became, to Nauplius, a tacit tribute to his wronged offspring's memory. Nauplius grasped he could not muster forces against the kings who betrayed his son. Yet he mastered the lore of shores and harbors, fickle gales, and celestial guides of vessels. His vendetta lingered unfinished, so he bided time. When Troy's war concluded and Greek ships sailed homeward, he awaited them on marine trails. With deceptive beacons lit atop perilous coastal crags, he misled Agamemnon's fleet and others, drawing crafts to fatal wrecks. The hulls splintered on rocks. As years rolled by, Palamedes faded from war's formal chronicles. Bards lauded Achilles' exploits, Odysseus' ploys, Priam's woes. But Palamedes? His name folk shunned to speak. His recollection proved too troubling. His lot too ignominious for victors to extol. The hero who lent order, logic, and kindness to Troy's encirclement dwindled to a shade history forgot. His saga resounds as a caution. Justice among mortals suffices not. One must also endure their conceits. The hero who tutored Greek to tally, scribe, and ponder was undone by those unable to stomach being outdone in merit. While many Greek heroes gained renown for conquests, Palamedes endures through his collapse, a fall unveiling war's grim visage, where the direst foe, at times, stands not ahead, but beside us.
Beyond Achilles, there was another young Greek hero whose name was immortalized for fighting before the walls of Troy. He was not a time-forged king like Nestor or Agamemnon, nor a cunning strategist like Odysseus or Palamedes. His name was Patroclus, and his identity mirrored that of the very embodiment of war, Achilles. If Achilles was the storm, the divine fury and blinding glory, Patroclus was the earth that received the rain, the stillness before the thunder, and the shadow that gave depth to the light. His story is not that of a demigod who sought glory for himself, but of a man who wore another's glory out of compassion, and with that sealed the fate of all. His journey began not with a prophecy of grandeur, but with error and exile. In his youth, a fit of anger during a game led him to take the life of a companion. It was the kind of mistake that marks a man forever, a ghost that would follow him all his life. Forced to flee his homeland, he found refuge in the realm of Phthia, under the protection of King Peleus. There, in that unlikely refuge, his destiny intertwined with that of the young prince Achilles. While Achilles was raised to be a god among men, trained by the centaur Chiron in the arts of war and healing, Patroclus grew at his side, not as a servant, but as the other half of the same soul. Achilles, with a goddess's blood running through his veins, possessed a fury that set him apart from mortals. He was swift, lethal, and brilliant, but also proud and distant, like a star admired from afar, whose heat burns those who draw too near. Patroclus was his bridge to the world. A little older, more measured, he was the anchor that kept Achilles' ship moored to the shore of humanity. There was between them a loyalty that transcended friendship. Patroclus saw in Achilles the greatness he himself would never have, and Achilles found in Patroclus the refuge, calm, and conscience his impetuous nature denied him. They were the warrior and his heart, and they marched to Troy together, not as a prince and his squire, but as a single, indivisible force. During the first 9 years of the war, while the Greek armies fought beneath Troy's walls, Patroclus remained a constant yet discreet presence. He fought bravely and tended the wounded with the skill he had learned from Chiron, but his true role unfolded far from the battlefield, in the tent he shared with Achilles. It was he who soothed the hero's anger, who heard his frustrations, who reminded him of the world beyond his own thirst for glory. When the great fracture among the Achaeans occurred, when Agamemnon's pride wounded Achilles' honor and Achilles, in monumental wrath, withdrew from the war, it was Patroclus who stayed by his side. But unlike Achilles, who closed himself within his resentment, Patroclus kept his eyes open. From his privileged and yet tortuous vantage point, he saw what his friend's fury was causing. He saw the Greek ships threatened by Trojan fire, heard the laments for warriors who fell day after day, and felt the weight of despair settling over the Achaean camp. The pain of his compatriots became his own. While Achilles saw only his stained honor, Patroclus saw the crumbling of a common cause. The collective suffering ate at him in a way a personal affront never could. It was this empathy, this ability to feel another's pain as his own, that turned him from an observer into the pivotal catalyst in the war between Greeks and Trojans. Unable to bear the sight of his friends being slaughtered, he approached Achilles not with a counselor's logic, but with the desperate plea of a broken heart. He confronted the hero, calling his intransigence cruel and inhuman, and begged that if he would not fight, he at least allow Patroclus to go in his stead, wearing his armor to give the Greeks hope and terrify the Trojans. Achilles, moved by his companion's pain, yielded. He handed over his divine armor, the very panoply that made him a specter of death on the battlefield. In that moment, Patroclus ceased to be himself and became an echo of Achilles. The armor was at once a blessing and a curse. With it, he bore the aura of the greatest warrior in the world, but also the weight of an identity not his own, and a target for the fury of gods and men. Achilles warned him with words that would seal his fate. Drive the Trojans from the ships, but do not advance to the walls. When Patroclus burst onto the battlefield, the effect was immediate and overwhelming. The Trojans, advancing with the certainty of victory, fell back in panic, believing Achilles' fury and his myrmidons had returned. The man who had once been a quiet presence became a whirlwind of destruction. He was not merely an imposter posing as a warrior. The courage that had always lived in his chest freed by the urgency of the moment, manifested with brutal force. He led the Myrmidons, broke the enemy lines, and in his supreme moment of glory, killed the renowned Trojan ally Sarpedon, son of Zeus himself, a deed that put him in direct conflict with fate. But glory, for a mortal who dares to touch the divine, is a very sweet poison. Drunk on success, feeling the armor's power and the roar of battle, Patroclus forgot Achilles' warning. He was seized by a drive to end the war once and for all. He did not stop at the ships. He chased the retreating Trojans to the foot of Troy's unassailable walls. There he challenged the very limits of his mortality. 3 times he assaulted the walls, and 3 times he was driven back by the god Apollo, Troy's protector. The god warned him to withdraw, for it was not his fate to take the city that day. But at the height of his fury, blind to divine warnings, Patroclus sealed his end. Enraged by his audacity, Apollo struck him from behind, tearing away his helmet and his wits. Stunned and exposed, he was wounded by the spear of the Trojan Euphorbus, and at last was dealt the fatal blow by Hector, Prince of Troy, who, seeing the great warrior disoriented, seized the chance to claim the glory. Patroclus fell, a victim of his own unbridled courage. Over the fallen body unfolded an act of supreme arrogance, a sacrilege that would echo through the heavens and seal Hector's own fate. The Prince of Troy, with blood still hot and dripping from his spear, was not content with the enemy's death. He saw the divine armor Patroclus wore, the work of Hephaestus, a gift from the gods to Peleus, and coveted it. In a profane gesture of triumph, Hector stripped the corpse, tearing away piece by piece the immortal gleam that had covered mortal flesh. Hector was not merely taking spoils of war, he was clothing himself in death itself. A new battle erupted, not for territory or glory, but for the vulnerable body of Patroclus. One last desperate effort by the Achaeans to honor the man who had died to save them. Patroclus's death was not merely the fall of another warrior, it was the sound of a world breaking. The news, carried to Achilles, brought not sorrow, but a cataclysm. Achilles' grief was primal, inhuman. He tore his clothes, ripped out his hair, and roared in a way that made his mother, the goddess Thetis, rise from the depths of the sea. In that moment, the world understood Patroclus's true importance. He was not Achilles' shadow, he was his soul. With his death, the hero's proud wrath became a torrent of mourning and vengeance that nothing could stop. The war, for Achilles, was no longer about honor and glory. It was about Hector. It was about hunting the man who had taken his other half. When at last Patroclus's body was recovered and borne to Achilles' tent, the hero's pain transfigured into a grand and terrible rite of mourning. The funeral pyre was raised, monumental, like the grief that inspired it. Upon it, Achilles laid his beloved companion's body, covering it with honey and precious unguents. But honor was not limited to riches. In a fury of grief that blurred the line between hero and monster, Achilles sacrificed 12 young Trojan prisoners, their lives offered as a dark oblation to Patroclus's shade. Achilles himself led the funeral lament, cutting his long golden hair, which had been consecrated to a river god of his homeland, and placing it in his friend's cold hands. He refused to eat or bathe until vengeance was complete. That night, Patroclus' spirit appeared to him in a dream, pleading for a swift cremation so that he might finally cross the river Acheron and find peace. The funeral became a solemn oath, sealed with fire, blood, and tears, that Achilles' world would make sense again, only when Hector's blood was spilled upon that very ground. In the end, Patroclus was remembered not for his deeds, but for the void he left behind. His death was the sacrifice that roused the fury which would at last turn the tide of war, leading to the death of Hector, Troy's great defender. Patroclus was the echo that, when silenced, made room for a cry of infinite pain.
Among all champions who trod toward Troy's ramparts, few bore time's burden as did Nestor, Pylos' aged sovereign. No longer youthful when war's breezes stirred, he still met the summons with dignity. Nestor wielded no spear with Achilles' ferocity, nor schemed like Odysseus. His tools were recollection and seasoned know-how. He remained the final tie to a bygone cadre of heroes, keeper of lost tales, and advisor to restless rulers. Esteemed by all, Nestor moved among youthful fighters like a lighthouse amid gales, a man who would glimpse glory's sheen, defeat's gore, and the hush of those unreturned. Still, he opted to battle anew. Long ere Troy turned the Achaeans' aim, Nestor's name echoed in valiant chants. Son of Menelaus, Pylos' establisher, and Poseidon's grandson, he bore royal and divine lifeblood in his veins. In younger days, he stood a daunting combatant, bold and swift, his valor matching his era's finest heroes. He clashed with feral centaurs, menacing Thessaly's expanses, braved mighty Hercules during Pylos' raid, and outlasted fights that felled his siblings and comrades. He watched his father succumb to Hercules' wrath, yet never let sorrow sour him. Rather, anguish and years shaped him, turning grief to caution and fury to restraint. From the outset, he knew when to engage, withdraw, or discourse, a remnant of an age when heroes weighed legacy over battlefield clamor. As Greek hosts amassed on Aulus's shores to sail for Troy, many lords came with hubris, others hesitation, some chasing fame alone. But Nestor brought a rarer gift: remembrance. His mere being among rulers lent gravitas to discussions and depth to deliberations. Agamemnon, though proud, hearkened to his counsel keenly. Achilles, despite brashness, offered deference. Odysseus, guile's maestro, found him a puzzle, for Nestor grasped every ruse before Ithaca claimed a throne. His years alone did not grant sway, but what they signified: know-how tempered in old wars, understanding built from gains and losses, and a scarce gift to discern men beyond their mail. At gatherings, Nestor spoke resolutely, wielding memories as beacons. He recounted past struggles not for boast, but to caution, instruct, avert old blunders. He served as grandsire to a restive brood, tasked to both steer and temper fiery zeal. In dire straits, when forces risked fracturing or ire threatened to eclipse reason, his steady tone restored poise. Yet wisdom found not always eager ears among kings. Nestor knew this. He voiced not ever expecting heed, but because he grasped that, with God's mute, men's sole guide lay in yesteryear's echoes. Yet even the eldest insight cannot quell youthful heart's tempest. When strife brewed between Agamemnon and Achilles, endangering the Greek host's core, Nestor stood as arbiter. The aged king, who had seen many heroes ruin all for pride, knew this rift might prove deadlier than any Trojan dart. He called both to parley, speaking as ever unhurried. He faced Agamemnon firmly, noting even the mightiest ruler should not slight his prime allies. Then turned to Achilles with near fatherly care, recalling his bloodline, youth, yet stressing shared honor over lone acclaim. That day, though, his words landed like seeds on arid soil. Agamemnon, swelled by rank, stood firm. Achilles, ablaze with rage, quit the fray, dragging the whole Greek spirit with him. Nestor sat hushed post-failure, like a sire watching kin stray despite all guidance. He knew time, his trusty friend, would yield clarity, but till then, many would perish from a clash avoidable. Though his phrases cut like steel, Nestor shunned their shelter. When spear clash rang and battle dust rose, Pylos' old king lingered not in tent shade. He rode his war cart deftly, led his band with a vigor defying age's mark. Amid slaughter, his stance shone as valor's light for younger troops. They sensed hope endured if Nestor stood. During the Trojans' fierce assault on Greek ships, spurred by Hector, Nestor held firm with grit. His cart hemmed in, steeds slain, yet he yielded not. Diomedes saved him, a hero seeing in Nestor more than an old man, a model. Still in chaos, the elder found breath to direct the youth, advise the best path, safeguard the fleet, and rally the ranks. War might no longer suit his years, but Nestor proved he belonged to that ravaged ground. Gods, oft eyeing brash youth, also gazed on this man aged nobly, who, ringed by death, stayed true to life, order, and his chosen cause. Of Nestor's many laurels, fatherhood ranked dearest. His sons, reared on honor and bravery, fought beside him in Troy's campaign, with Antilochus, youthful, bold, and loyal, standing out. Nestor saw in him a mirror of his prime. Antilochus proved a staunch shield for Menelaus, his battlefield daring cheered by all. Yet each feat stirred in Nestor a quiet dread. He knew war's ways like few. He understood glory's approach heralded death, too. It was the quandary gnawing every hero's parent. Pride strode with fear. The foreboding proved true. Antilochus fell, slain by Memnon, Aurora's son. His valiant lad died guarding his father from the ebony-skinned warrior's onslaught. Even as his son dropped, he cursed no gods, blamed no foes. He withdrew, bearing the stoic sorrow of those knowing war spares neither the just nor sage's kin. With Antilochus's loss and war's relentless march, the old king watched new heroes claim the fore, fame-hungry, heedless of counsel, driven more by a mortal craving than present duty. To him, the shift was plain. War's essence had morphed. No longer about safeguarding, justice's fight, or city's balance. It turned to might, pride, and ruin. He was the last bastion of a culture prizing wisdom over wrath. Thus, despite pain, he held fast, not from hope, but obligation. For should he falter, none would recall the tale's start. Ultimately, gods marked Nestor not for epic feats, nor bards for ringing wins. Few recalled him as he who stayed. He bore history's load on his frame, generations' heft in his soul. He outlived peers' demise, foes' rise, kings' heirs succeeding sires, making him the loneliest hero. Nestor embodied what war first raises, wisdom. Yet he persisted. Not for praise, but memory. So, twixt war cries, some might still catch reason's call amid ruins. If glory crowns killers, memory, perchance, crowns those living to recount. Priam is the legendary king of the glorious city of Troy, even before the name of his city became a byword for tragedy and ruin. As a young man, Priam was still known under the name Podarches, and during this period, he experienced a traumatic experience that would mark his life and shape him as a ruler. During the war between Troy and the Hercules-led Greeks, under the reign of his father Laomedon, the young prince was taken prisoner by the enemies. His sister Hesione was also taken as a slave. Priam's abduction was a direct consequence of the actions of his father Laomedon. The king of Troy had hired Poseidon and Apollo to build the city walls, but then refused to pay the agreed price, enraging the gods. To retaliate, Poseidon sent a sea monster to terrorize Troy, and Laomedon vowed to sacrifice his daughter Hesione to appease the creature. But the Greek hero Hercules was commissioned by the king to face and slay the monster, saving Hesione. Yet again, Laomedon broke his promise and refused to reward Hercules for his deed, even sending the hero away from Troy in a humiliating manner. This double cross incensed the hero, who swore revenge and gathered the Greek army that stormed Troy, killing the king and capturing Prince Podarces and Princess Hesiod. The prince's imprisonment was a humiliating and painful event for the young man. He witnessed the death of many of his compatriots. This deeply scarred him, making him more cautious and diplomatic in his relations with other nations. However, the captivity also empowered him, teaching him the importance of endurance and perseverance despite adversity. After a spell in captivity, the prince returned to Troy and came to be called Priam, which means the ransomed one. He seized the throne that had belonged to his father and began a reign of glory and prosperity. Father of 50 children and loved by his people, it seemed that the challenging times were now behind him. Then his wife had a prophetic dream announcing that Priam's son Paris would be the cause of Troy's destruction. Appalled at the prospect of the downfall of his kingdom and his people, Priam made the difficult decision to have his infant son abandoned on Mount Ida, hoping to avoid the prophesied catastrophe. Fate, however, like a river, took its inexorable course. Paris was found and raised by shepherds, growing up oblivious to his true identity and the role he would play in the destruction of his native city. Priam's attempt to escape fate by abandoning Paris only postponed the inevitable, sowing the seeds of the tragedy that would unfold years later. The king led his kingdom into a prosperous and booming era. Under his rule, Troy flourished, growing into a rich and powerful city, a center of commerce and culture. The city's wealth was clear in its lavish palaces, its imposing temples, and its fortified walls, which protected it from invaders. As ruler, Priam was known for his wisdom and keen understanding of justice. He made every effort to uphold peace and order in his kingdom, settling disputes and conflicts impartially. His opinions were valued by both his subjects and his peers. His court was a center of debate and discussion, where Priam carefully listened to different perspectives before making important decisions. He fathered Aeschylus with his first wife Arisba. Following her death, Priam married Hecuba, with whom he had 19 children, including Hector, Paris, Cassandra, Deiphobus, and Polyxena. Priam also had children with other women, for a total of 50 sons and numerous daughters. He loved all his sons, but had a special fondness for Hector, his firstborn and heir to the throne. The latter was a valiant warrior and a respected leader, embodying the values of honor and courage that Priam cherished. When Priam heard that his son Paris was alive, he welcomed him back into his family when his true identity was revealed. Yet Priam's decision would still be a source of suffering and regret for the king. In a bid to bolster diplomatic ties with Greece and appease old tensions, Priam sent his son Paris on a diplomatic mission to Sparta. Paris was meant to represent Troy with honor and establish friendly relations with the Greek kingdom. But fate had other plans. After all, the Trojan prince left with Helen, the Spartan queen and wife of King Menelaus. In Priam's eyes, the kidnapping of Helen by Paris was a reckless and impulsive act that jeopardized Troy's peace and security. The king, who had always cherished diplomacy and caution, was appalled by his son's behavior. He could sympathize with Helen's beauty and charm, but he knew that an abduction of a married woman, especially the wife of a powerful king like Menelaus, would have grave consequences. The looming threat of war hung over Troy as the Greek armies assembled, clamoring for revenge for Helen's abduction. Priam found himself at an unnerving crossroads. While he recognized the gravity of his son Paris's reckless act, his fatherly love yearned for a peaceful solution. A war, with its bloody and destructive aftermath, was the last thing Priam wanted for his beloved people. A desperate attempt to avoid the imminent conflict, Priam turned to diplomacy, with proposals for restitution and priceless offerings. He was hoping that common sense and reason would prevail, that the Greeks would accept the offers and return home in peace. Nevertheless, the Greeks' thirst for revenge was unquenchable, and war raged like a merciless storm over Troy. With every battle, with every life lost, Priam's heart sank into a sea of sadness and despair. He was forced to see his sons, the princes who would one day rule Troy, leave for the battlefield, aware that many would not return. With each report of a new fall, the burden of the crown became heavier on his head. The death of each Trojan soldier was a gaping wound in his soul, a cruel reminder of the tragedy he had failed to avert. The death of Hector, the firstborn and heir to the throne, struck Priam with a devastating blow. The king, always so proud of his son's bravery and nobility, witnessed his world crumble before his eyes. The image of Hector lifelessly dragged over the walls of Troy by Achilles, the irate Greek hero, tormented him for days and nights. The pain of the loss was so intense that Priam barely breathed, almost unable to find the strength to stand. He even tried to jump from the top of the Trojan walls, but was prevented from doing so by his sons. Yet, despite his pain and despair, Priam unexpectedly found inner strength. Buoyed by fatherly love and the need to honor his son, he made a bold and risky decision. Under cover, the king left the safety of Troy and slipped into the Greek camp in search of Achilles, Hector's murderer. As he knelt at the warrior's feet, Priam implored for the return of his son's body, kissing the hands of the man who had inflicted such great pain. Priam's plea, fraught with emotion and sincerity, touched Achilles' heart. Remembering his own father, the warrior perceived Priam not as an enemy, but as a bereaved father. In an act of compassion, Achilles handed back Hector's body, allowing Priam to carry it back to Troy and grant him a proper funeral. The war had changed Priam, the once proud and self-assured king, into a broken and disillusioned man. He had seen the war's true face, its cruelty and hollowness. The loss of his sons and the destruction of his city made him question his decisions and recognize his mistakes. Priam lamented having supported Paris in kidnapping Helen and wished he had done more to stop the conflict. The war taught him that the ultimate greatness of a king does not lie in his wealth or power, but in his ability to protect his people and spread peace. Following 10 long years of war and the demise of their greatest heroes, hope of victory appeared distant for the Trojans. The once majestic city was now in ruin, and its defenders exhausted and demoralized. In this moment of despair, the Greeks concocted a ruse that would change the course of the war: the Trojan horse. Supposedly an offering to the gods, a gigantic wooden horse was left by the Greeks on the Trojan beach. Believing the present to be a sign of peace, the Trojans took it into the city, ignoring the warnings of Cassandra, Priam's daughter, who had the gift of prophecy, but was cursed never to be believed. In the quiet hours of the night, as the Trojans celebrated what they believed to be the end of the war, Greek warriors hidden inside the horse burst out, opening the city gates to the rest of the army. Troy, which had withstood the siege for such a long time, was taken by unexpected means. A brutal massacre ensued. The Trojan streets became a bloody river. Men, women, and children were mercilessly slaughtered. Palaces and temples were looted and torched. The once glorious city was lost to ashes. The old king Priam witnessed the destruction of his kingdom and the death of his people with a broken heart. He had seen his sons murdered, his daughters taken as slaves, and his city engulfed in flames. When his royal palace was stormed, he ran into Neoptolemus, Achilles' son, who brutally murdered him in front of Zeus's altar, where the king had found shelter. Priam's death, the last king of Troy, brought with it the end of an era. The fall of Troy and Priam's slaying is a grim depiction of the cruelty of war and the frailty of human life.